Hi, my name is Daniel Horn, and in this IT in the Wild report, I'm going to cover software as a service and its use in two organizations. Now, to get started, I want to make sure we understand the concept of software as a service, so let's talk a little bit about what that is. So typically, when we think of software, we think of the traditional model, where a company may develop software in-house or buy it and install it on personal computer or server inside the company. Now, in this model, the software can be thought of as a product. Some examples of this might be Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel. These products are typically purchased and installed on each and every computer in the company. Now with Software as a Service, or SaaS, both the applications and data are hosted by a vendor or service provider and made available to customers over the internet and can be accessed through a web browser. We often hear the term cloud or cloud computing used in conjunction with software as a service, and this just refers to the fact that the vendor of the software is hosting the software on distributed servers connected to the internet. Now, relative to the traditional software deployment model, software as a service is a relatively new concept. But as this chart shows, even in its short lifetime, already 60% of major companies are using it, and of the 40% not using it, many cited the reason just to be a lack of need. Experts are also forecasting high rates of growth for software as a service, with estimates that the market will grow approximately 25% worldwide in the next year. So just based on the usage and growth numbers alone, we can already start to see that software as a service is a powerful technology and is impacting many organizations. So let's take a look at what some of the reasons for this high adoption is. So the first benefit is lower cost. With software as a service, you generally pay a subscription fee to use the software as opposed to the traditional model where you purchase it outright. So some software as a service solutions have transactional models where payment is based on what you use and not just to have access to the product. This generally contributes to the lower cost. In most cases, all it takes to access a software as a service solution is a web browser, so companies don't need to worry about how they're going to install the software across the enterprise. Because the vendor handles all the infrastructure and installation, this makes software as a service solutions much faster to deploy to an entire company. Now, scalability refers to the fact that cloud-based applications usually can grow or shrink to fit the companies that are using them much easier than traditional software. So companies that have 100 users or 100,000 users can still use the same applications. The next bullet point, zero infrastructure, refers to the fact that organizations no longer have to worry about the complexity of building servers and hardware to meet the requirements of the solution. That's now all handled by the vendor. High levels of service means that cloud-based applications rarely have outages. Tools like Google Search are available 99.9% of the time, not only due to the expertise of Google, but to the nature of these internet-based applications. And the last point here is that with software as a service, there's also a reduced learning curve. Customers that are familiar with using websites and web applications can just pick these up a lot faster than traditional applications. So this is a pretty high-level list of benefits, but you can see some of the reasons that organizations are starting to consider software as a service solutions. So let's move on to a list of drawbacks. Now, security is one of the main drawbacks. Anytime you're hosting your data externally, you have to worry about the risk that that gets stolen or lost. So software as a service solutions in some circumstances may not be as secure as something hosted within an organization. But depending on the nature of the data, this can be a make or break decision when it comes to choosing software or vendor. Compliance refers to the fact that because you have less control over the software, it may be difficult to make sure a software as a service solution complies with all of your organization's business policies and practices. You might not have the same amount of customization that you do in a homegrown system to ensure this. From a performance standpoint, the big concern with hosting data externally is that you need a decent internet connection to ensure that you can access the data. I haven't heard of many corporations still using dial-up, so for the most part, this one isn't a problem. Certain vendors also make it difficult to integrate data with your other applications that might be internal. A lot of times vendors have to provide custom solutions in order to meet some of those specific requirements, and that can get a little pricey. There's also an inherent risk of data loss when you let someone else manage your data. If a small software as a service provider were to go out of business, you would risk losing all that data. So it's very important that when choosing a solution, these companies are evaluated from a stability perspective before committing. For the last bullet point, while web programming has come a long way in terms of functionality, there are still certain features that are difficult to do on the web, so some software as a service applications can be less capable than their traditional counterparts. Many of these risks here can be mitigated by making sure you carefully select the vendor for your software, but it's important that an organization is aware of what they'll be getting before they commit to a solution. Okay, now that we've got a little bit of a background, let's go ahead and take a look at some cases where it's being used. The first company I want to talk about is General Electric, or GE. So now, as many of you know, GE is a multinational conglomerate, meaning it's got its feet wet with many unrelated businesses, including appliance manufacturing, aviation, consumer products, oil and gas, and the list really goes on and on. Now, as you can imagine, with a company the size of GE, with around 300,000 employees throughout the world, it could be a challenge to deploy software. So when GE started looking for a new supply chain management solution, they wanted to keep their options open. Now, I work in IT, so call me an IT professional if you wish, but I'm used to looking at things from a requirements perspective. So I've listed here some of the things that GE was hoping to accomplish with the solution. First and foremost, GE needed a robust solution capable of managing and tracking nearly 500,000 global suppliers. Things they were tracking were contact information, legal information, so on and so forth. The next 2 points here go hand in hand, as we'll see in a minute, but GE wanted to improve the access to their software both internally with their employees and externally with their employers, and they wanted to improve the accuracy of the data to make sure it was always up to date. Now, the next bullet's something every company desires. They want a solution that's going to be cost effective and give them the best bang for their buck. GE was large enough and capable enough to develop and host their own software, but as you'll see from their decision, that's not necessarily always the best solution. And last but not least, GE was looking to unify the supply chain management process by centralizing information and integrating many separate applications into a smooth workflow. So after GE did all their evaluation and weighed all their options, they ended up choosing a service called Aravo SIM, or SIM, which stands for Supplier Information Management. Now, Aravo SIM is a cloud-hosted solution, so it's hosted externally outside the company firewall, and it's accessible via the internet. Now, my goal here isn't to compare Aravo SIM to other supply chain management solutions, but I want to demonstrate how using Aravo SIM and software as a service can benefit the company. So let's walk back through the requirements and talk about how this software fulfilled the needs of GE. So for me, the first requirement was the easiest to achieve. GE was previously using a homegrown system that could no longer keep up with their needs, and they had the options to build their own software or purchase a product to install using their infrastructure, or they could choose a software as a service solution that's hosted and managed externally. Any of these options would have sufficed, but they ended up choosing the latter of the three, really because the way it handles the remaining requirements. The improvement of accessibility was one of the main reasons GE opted to use Aravo SIM. Because it was externally hosted and made accessible through the internet, it opened up the process and it allowed the external suppliers in each facet of the business to maintain their own information, which they couldn't really easily do with a solution that sat behind GE's firewall. So the suppliers could maintain their info, and internal employees could still use a regular web browser to access the information and quickly and easily retrieve the information they needed. Now, the software also provided managers at GE access to real-time views of customer profiles and reports on information such as supplier history and compliance monitoring. Even further, the software provided support for 6 languages already and is continually adding more, so it could be deployed to some of these other countries where GE was operating much more efficiently than a homegrown solution could be. Improvements in data quality were realized by letting the suppliers maintain their own information. So rather than having some convoluted process to submit and retrieve information that's entered by a GE employee, suppliers could just log into a web portal and enter the information they need. It also enabled GE the ability to define rules and regulations with how information was submitted to ensure that all the suppliers remained in compliance. From a cost perspective, hosting a solution in the cloud had a couple of benefits. One of the major advantages was the company didn't need to deploy any new infrastructure or spend time worrying about how to install the software on the 300,000 odd users' computers. Now, any employee with a web browser, which they already had, could access the solution, and the vendor would deal with the infrastructure. See, this enabled GE to roll out the entire supply chain management solution in only 7 months from start to finish, with most of that time being spent transferring information from the old system into the new. All of these here are factors that enabled Aravo SIM to be a much cheaper solution to implement while still satisfying all of the requirements. Now the last bullet point, process unification, that's a work in progress, but Aravo SIM supports integration with many other software solutions that are already being used, solutions from SAP or IBM. This enables GE to take many disparate systems and integrate them into a unified process from start to finish. So GE's use of software as a service in this case was a testament to the power and flexibility of this new software as a service delivery model. It enabled the company to deploy a more robust solution while at the same time lowering the costs. This example here was one of the biggest rollouts. It occurred in 2008 and was a significant step for a large company to take. Many others are following suit after witnessing this sort of improved rollout and increased efficiency. So now if we turn our focus to a second company, I want to look at a provider of software as a service that you may already be familiar with. Google is actually one of the largest. Now, if you're like me, you might not have connected the concepts at first, but Google has been providing software as a service for quite some time. Gmail, Google Docs, Google Calendar, and other products all offer a web-based alternative to applications that were traditionally delivered as products in the past. Now, what I want to highlight about Google's offerings, however, is the spin they take on the day-to-day use applications like email and word processing, as opposed to the specialized needs of something like a CRM or ERP system or the supply chain management system that GE implemented. So let's just think about something we do every day, checking our email at Mississippi State. So when you log into the portal and click Bully Mail, it redirects you to Gmail. So that's a perfect example of how an IT company like Google can provide a service that can be leveraged by many companies and institutions. In the Gmail scenario, Mississippi State would pay a fee to Google and in return no longer has to deal with hosting their own email servers, managing security, or any of the other details that come with providing an internally hosted email service. So the university is now able to get by without the stress of all those technical aspects of deployment and can rest assured knowing that Gmail has well over 99.9% uptime. So that's peace of mind that you don't always get when you are providing your own internal solution. Now, more and more commonplace is companies that are taking advantage of Google's APIs and services to integrate Google software into their own solutions. So let's take a look at an example. Salesforce.com is a cloud computing company that's best known for its CRM, customer relationship management services, and is considered one of the best companies to work for and one of the most innovative companies in the US. Now, Salesforce.com in itself is a software as a service company, so they really know the value of this deployment model. Now, internally, Salesforce uses Google Apps as a replacement for their typical suite of Microsoft productivity apps. Gmail and Google Calendar can replace Microsoft Exchange and Outlook, with the added benefit of making your email available through the cloud. Google Docs can replace Excel, Word, PowerPoint, and not only provide a newer technology based on today's internet standards, but enable other features such as live document editing and collaboration that couldn't be achieved with the traditional software. Now, as one of the fastest growing IT companies in the world, it was very important that Salesforce be able to take advantage of this software as a service model because it allowed them to onboard employees at a much faster rate than companies stuck using traditional software deployment methods. So this Salesforce example demonstrates an interesting usage of software as a service to replace tools that have been deeply rooted in organizations since before companies even had widespread internet access. Now, taking the use of Google software as a service even further, Salesforce also baked integration with Google Apps right into their own software. So with the click of a button, companies that use Salesforce CRM software can link it to Google Apps and can now take advantage of all the communication, collaboration, and sharing features provided by Google Apps. So we've talked about some of the feature benefits that Google Docs has over traditional Microsoft offerings, but there are implementation benefits as well. So in this first scenario, with all of the employees using Google Apps, all the employees now use the same version of the software and they don't have to worry about incompatibilities between different hardware versions and software versions. Google's the one that ensures that the software works across an array of devices and Google handles all of the software upgrades. So now Google's taking care of all the trench work, but updates are also occurring faster, more reliably, and more consistently because that's Google's one concern. Now, this concept of centralization and universality makes software deployment and use much more convenient than it was in the past. Now, shifting gears to this integration concept, When you start to look at the integration of these applications into other products, it can result in huge gains in efficiency for a company. So if you're an organization using the Salesforce CRM and you choose to use Google Apps integration, it can centrally locate all your documents, it can eliminate the hassle of configuring integration mechanisms for some other software, and it can enable teams to effectively collaborate and communicate using some of those technological advantages that Google Apps provides. So here we have a case of a software as a service company that leverages another software as a service company to provide even greater benefits for consumers and users of their products. Now, the last thing I want to talk about before I wrap up this presentation is another advantage that comes with any organization using Google Software as a Service solutions. So we discussed the technical benefits, and as you'll recall on the benefits slide, there's also gains to be realized because everyone's already familiar with Google's offerings in their personal lives. It's very easy for someone to pick up and start using their corporate Gmail account because they've already been using a Gmail account for personal use. So this is one of those features that enabled Salesforce.com to onboard employees so quickly and grow so rapidly. The learning curve is a lot less steep if the person's already familiar with the software in their personal life. So to wrap things up, here we can see two cases of how software as a service is being leveraged in organizations. At GE, it's a replacement to a homegrown solution that opens the door for external suppliers and internal employees to work together. And Salesforce and Google are working together to replace word processing and productivity applications that have been around since before the internet with a newer solution that puts a fresh and innovative spin on things. I think we're going to continue to see a push towards software as a service both at home and at work. Companies will continue moving their data into the cloud, and I think we'll see more and more integration of these cloud applications as companies continue to look for single solutions. And that's all I have. Thanks.